Good afternoon. Most of you know this is my channel. My name's Mitch Robertson. I'm Director of Enterprise Systems at Caro Financial. But wanted to drop this one in really quick, and it's a little bit about TLS troubleshooting and Revealx and how important some of these things are, and how we can use Revealx to do some pretty cool troubleshooting. So basically, with the TLS handshake, multiple things have to happen during that handshake. Client requests to do the TLS, sends a version cipher suites it supports. This is the client hello in the beginning of the TLS handshake. I've got a few videos up that kind of show that in a Wireshark trace. The server responds with the certificate and what cipher suite it's going to allow everybody to use to kind of finalize that conversation. Client does checks for dates. Client checks for OCSP or CRL, which is a certificate revocation list. So it checks to make sure that certificate hasn't been revoked. And then the client checks the name on the cert for a match. Then it goes through a change cipher suite because it wants to go to the symmetric key exchange. So that way it's using a symmetric key, which is not as CPU intensive. So it goes through and does all that. And theoretically, it should finish in under 15 seconds or less. And actually, there's a timeout that's pretty much honored everywhere, that if the TLS handshake takes longer than 15 seconds, then you're going to get a can't connect message or a failure on the TLS side of things. So 15 seconds is usually how long this takes. But we're going to show you some instances and show you how Revealx shows some things that happen within the TLS handshake. And so right here, if you take a look right here at this spot here around 2 o'clock, you'll see that we're seeing a lot of aborts. If you look over here, this yellow is aborted sessions. So normally we run along, no problems at all. We see we had the same problem earlier in the day where the TLS handshake, and this is specific for SSL. So this is not looking at TCP. This isn't looking at HTTP after the fact. This is only looking at the TLS handshake, and it starts measuring from the minute Revealx sees the client hello. So it sees the client hello being passed, and it automatically says that's an SSL session. So we're going to start looking, and if at any time during that session it aborts, then that's going to be called an abort, so that session doesn't complete going all the way through. So that's really important to note. So we all of a sudden had a lot of aborted sessions, and here it is really in a different time frame, pulling a little bit closer to take a better look at it. So you see that 1540, the aborted session started. So this is really kind of important to understand that this is giving us an indication of a problem, and you can have alerts based on aborted sessions, those kind of things. But we're having a large number of aborted sessions in this demonstration that we're doing right now. So it's not a good thing, right? So what is an abort in a TLS session? Basically anything in that check. In other words, as soon as Revealx sees that client hello, if it doesn't see the server response, then it's going to, after 15 seconds, it's going to consider it an abort, right? Or if something sends a close or a fin saying that the TCP connection closed or a reset, then TCP connection closed, it's going to consider that an abort. So if it happens before any of these things complete, so if all of these things have to complete in a decent amount of time, so that's a pretty good way of handling it and pretty good understanding of what that abort actually is. So after that kind of explanation of the aborts, I want to show you how this looks. This is a handshake time. So this is Revealx actually measuring that handshake time. And you'll notice that we have 6,300 milliseconds as a peak, and we're measuring maxes because you've got to be careful if you're looking at mean or the averages. Sometimes that will make everything look really good, but you're still having a problem because the maximums, some connections are still aborting. So you've got to know what you're looking at from a statistical point of view. But you take a look and you can see we've got connections that are failing at or hitting 6,300 milliseconds. That doesn't look bad, right? I told you it had to finish in 15 milliseconds. So is that the cause of our abort problem? Kind of interesting. 6 seconds, it kind of is an eternity for a browser, but still it shouldn't be aborting because of 6 seconds, or should it? If you think about how a load balancer works and the checks that it does, it's doing some sort of health check. Most balancers do a health check. during that health check, if it's set up correctly, if you're really wanting to load balance based on the application being available, it does a TCP three-way handshake. So each health check does a TCP three-way handshake, a TLS handshake, and then it sends a request to the health page that is in memory as long as the service is running. And if any step fails, the health check will be considered as failed and take the server out of the load. So again, using Revealx to troubleshoot your environment is important, but it's not always going to give you the signs if you don't understand what's actually happening, because that TLS handshake, 15 seconds, it should not abort on that because it was finishing in 6, or we thought it was finishing in 6. We'll show you a little bit more about this. So the load balance health check parameters in this instance that we were doing some evaluation on and some testing, there were a number of parameters that can be set. How often the load balancer checks the health. So is it every 3 seconds, every 5 seconds, every 15 seconds that it does one of those full checks? How long should the load balancer wait for the page to respond? 10 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, those kind of things. What is the status code that's returned when it does get to the health check page? But again, if it got to the health check page, it finished the TLS handshake. In our case, we're seeing TLS abort. So very interesting to note. And then in this case, load balancer was set to check every 5 seconds, must see 200 return from the health page in 2 seconds. So that means it has to get all the way through the TCP three-way handshake, has to get through the TLS handshake, and has to get the request to the page, and a page has to return a 200 OK in order for this to be successful. So in this case, 6 seconds, that health check was failing and sending a reset after 2 seconds. See the correlation? So do you understand how using Revealx is important to capture this kind of stuff so you can quickly get to your answers fairly fast? But you also have to have an understanding of the environment. So whoever's using Revealx, whoever's troubleshooting your environment, needs to know what parameters are being set on different things like load balancers, health checks, how the health check's being used, because it may not be an application health check. So it may never do a TLS handshake. So you just never know. I appreciate your time. If you can, could you subscribe to my channel? I hope you enjoyed it. Leave your questions, leave your concerns that you might have, leave things that you want me to talk about more, and I'll do so. So I appreciate your time. Thanks again. Have a great day.